The 7 trumpets in Revelation. In this video, we'll talk about Third Trumpet of Revelation. In our previous video, we shared our view that seals in Revelation occur in centurial intervals. For more, you may refer to our video on the 7 seals in Revelation. Similarly, it is also our view that the trumpets in Revelation occur in decadal intervals. Finding evidence for interpreting the trumpets can be relatively easier for obvious reasons. They occurred more recently, abound in historical accounts and archives, and have occurred in much shorter time intervals. So in interpreting the trumpets, it is simplest to first identify the easiest incidents to interpret. And if we start by interpreting the most easily identifiable obvious events related to the trumpets, it'll make the rest of the interpretation that much easier. And I believe that God provided names of some events so that it is easy for interpretation. By providing specific names, it serves as definite clues in interpreting the events. Among the 7 trumpets, there is not much specifics provided for the 7th trumpet other than the lightnings, voices, thunderings, and an earthquake, and a great hail. But among the rest of the 6 trumpets, we can filter out events with the names or description of the person or object provided. The name of a person or event recorded in prophecy of the 7 trumpets appear in the following 3 events. In the 3rd trumpet, the name wormwood is introduced. In 5th trumpet, the name Abaddon and Apollyon appear, and in the 6th trumpet, the Euphrates River. So we pick the 3rd trumpet first, which introduces the name wormwood. In Revelation chapter 8, verse 10, "And the 3rd angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the 3rd part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the 3rd part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter." The most important event to note here is that something fell from the sky, and as a result of it, something fell upon the rivers and the fountains of water, and consequently, the waters became wormwood. The word wormwood means bitter, and because the water turned bitter, people died from the water. The key here are the rivers and the waters. The word in English is wormwood. However, this word in the language of Ukraine is Chernobyl. Also in Russian, wormwood is translated as Chernobyl. So if you go back in the days of Soviet Union, there was an event called Chernobyl disaster. Do you recall the historical event? The word Chernobyl, which Ukrainian pronounced as Chernobyl, is the very word for wormwood and means wormwood. Therefore, when God wrote about Chernobyl, he was foretelling and hinting to us that this 3rd trumpet is about Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster. Then we must examine if Chernobyl fell upon the rivers to turn waters into bitter wormwood that caused people to die from it. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster occurred in April 26 of 1986. As you see from the map here, Chernobyl is shown in the center, and Moscow is at about 1 o'clock position. The Black Sea is at the southeast corner, and it becomes clear that the word wormwood is indeed Chernobyl. According to Wikipedia, 400 times more radioactive material was released than it had by the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. But according to some other research materials we looked into, they said there were 500 times of radioactive isotopes released from Chernobyl. And here's a link to one of the videos from Greenpeace about how Chernobyl occurred and the consequence of the nuclear disaster. Here is a scientific journal listed in PubMed, which database is maintained by United States National Library of Medicine at the National Institutes of Health. This investigation reveals that the Chernobyl radionuclides concentrates in the northern hemisphere are found 100,000 times to 1 million times more than the local background level. Among the list of affected things are water, sediments, plants, animals, and air particulates. So if you read Revelation chapter 8 verse 11 again, it says, "And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter." And if you watch the following video from the NHK, the Japanese investigators traced the radioactive contamination of water, which affected the food chain, caused cancers, and killed many people. Revelation clearly talks about the water contamination as the primary cause of death, but sources like Wikipedia do not reveal how seriously the waters were affected. Wikipedia even miswrites that the radioactivity in rivers and reservoirs was generally below guideline limits for safety drinking water. Groundwater was not badly affected by Chernobyl accident since radionuclides with short half-lives decayed away long before they could affect groundwater supplies. But these statements are mainly based on the old Soviet Union's claim, who didn't want to take upon the responsibility to compensate for the nuclear disaster. Therefore, it is important to also review the research investigations released from private and foreign groups who act as a third party to this matter. And this NHK report titled "Chernobyl, the Bitter Taste of Wormwood" clearly testifies to the seriousness of water contamination. If you go to the university library and look for a documentary on Chernobyl, this NHK video is one of the most sought and viewed videos on Chernobyl nuclear disaster. The original video is quite long, so I edited to show the most important parts. For those who will not consult the video, it starts by mentioning the accident being detected from the sky. The US satellite captures the red burning nuclear reactor, which was heated up from malfunction. After a day of the accident on April 26, the radionuclides quickly spread. In 3 days, it reached throughout the eastern China and Scandinavian peninsula. Later, the radioactive isotopes unique to the Chernobyl nuclear experiments were found even in the soils of the United States. The environmental damage was very serious because it rained for many days at the time of accident. So radioactive particles was heavily deposited with rainy clouds, and along with the pouring rain, many radioactive hotspots were created. The NHK reporters did the fabulous job tracing the environmental, especially the water, nuclear contamination from Chernobyl disaster. They traced all the water sources, including the Black Sea, to prove its contamination and the resulting consequences. And a professor from Princeton University explains the sharp increase in cancer rate after Chernobyl. In sum, the NHK report called "Chernobyl, the Bitter Taste of Wormwood" conclusively testifies the water contamination as primary source of sickness and death. Other attempts also have been made by others to interpret the third trumpet. Rather focusing on the fact that it is called a star, some theorized about third trumpet being some sort of an asteroid and or comet impact. Their main point is that there is a chemical change in the atmosphere due to the heat shock during the entry and or impact of a large asteroid or comet, reacting oxygen and nitrogen in the atmosphere to produce the nitric acid rain. But such descriptions do not particularly match with the name Wormwood or Chernobyl that God has provided. So I believe the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster in 1986 is the correct interpretation of the third trumpet. And of course, there are other alternative interpretations, such as Sun's nemesis pelted Earth with comets. I don't know too much about these alternative theories in depth, but if you're interested, you may further look into them. Anyways, these investigative people are mainly theorizing different possibilities from the perspective that the third trumpet has not sounded yet.